The entire restaurant went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop on the marble floor of Le Bernardin. Why? Because the most dangerous man in New York City, Lorenzo Valenti, was trying to eat dinner, and his 4-year-old son was screaming at the top of his lungs. Waiters were trembling. The manager was sweating bullets. No one dared to approach the table. They knew Lorenzo's temper was legendary. But then, a waitress who had nothing left to lose walked right up to the Don, took the sobbing boy's hand, and silenced the room with 5 words that would change the underworld forever. He just needs a mom. What happened next wasn't just a romance. It was a war. The air inside the Gilded Lily, Manhattan's most exclusive French restaurant on Fifth Avenue, was usually filled with the soft clinking of silver against bone china and the murmur of billion-dollar deals. Tonight, however, it was filled with the piercing, unending wail of a 4-year-old boy. And not just any boy. This was Matteo Valenti, the only son of Lorenzo Valenti. Lorenzo sat at the head of the best table in the house, a table usually reserved for senators or visiting royalty. He was a man carved from granite and regret. At 32, he wore his bespoke Tom Ford suit-like armor. His dark hair was slicked back, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes, the color of cold espresso, were currently squeezed shut in sheer frustration. "Matteo, please," Lorenzo said, his voice a low rumble that usually commanded armies of men in the underworld. "Eat your pasta, it's truffle." "No, I want—" Matteo choked on a sob, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. He swept his arm across the table, knocking a $200 glass of Pinot Noir onto the pristine white tablecloth. The crash echoed like a gunshot. Every head in the restaurant turned. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. At the table, the woman sitting next to Lorenzo recoiled in disgust. "Lorenzo, really?" Vanessa hissed, dabbing at her Prada dress with a napkin, though the wine hadn't touched her. Vanessa was a socialite, the daughter of a banking mogul, and the woman Lorenzo's advisor suggested would be a suitable match for a Don trying to legitimize his business. "Can't you control him? He's embarrassing us." Lorenzo's eyes snapped open. He looked at Vanessa with a coldness that made her freeze, then looked back at his son. He wasn't angry at the boy. He was terrified. He could run the entire East Coast shipping operation. He could negotiate with the cartels. But he couldn't stop his son from crying. Since his wife Elena had died in that car accident 2 years ago, Matteo had been a ghost of a child, silent or screaming. There was no in-between. "He's 4, Vanessa. He's grieving," Lorenzo snapped. "He's a brat," she muttered under her breath, checking her reflection in a spoon. Matteo screamed again, louder this time, kicking his legs against the velvet booth. The restaurant manager, a nervous man named Henri, hovered 10 feet away, looking like he was about to faint. He wanted to ask them to leave, but you didn't ask Lorenzo Valenti to leave, not if you wanted to keep your kneecaps. In the back of the kitchen, near the service station, Clara Mitchell adjusted her apron. "Don't do it, Clara," whispered Marco, the sous chef. "That's the Valenti table." Henri said only senior staff goes near him. Clara looked tired. She was 24, with messy chestnut hair tied in a bun, and eyes that had seen too much struggle for her age. She was working double shifts to pay off her late father's gambling debts and her nursing school tuition. She knew who Lorenzo was. Everyone in New York knew the name. But looking at that table, she didn't see a mob boss. She saw a father who was drowning and a little boy who was in pain. "The kid is miserable, Marco, and that woman he's with is making it worse," Clara said, grabbing a fresh napkin and a small bowl of strawberries. "Clara, you'll get fired!" Marco hissed. Clara didn't listen. She walked out of the kitchen, navigating the sea of judgmental faces. As she approached the table, the tension in the room spiked. The security guard standing by the pillar, a massive man named Rocco, stepped forward, his hand drifting toward his jacket pocket. Lorenzo saw the waitress approaching out of the corner of his eye. He prepared to bark at her, to tell her to get lost. But Clara didn't look at Lorenzo. She didn't look at the expensive suit or the terrifying bodyguards. She went straight to Mateo. She knelt down on the expensive carpet, ignoring the wine soaking into the fabric, bringing herself to the child's eye level. Mateo was mid-scream, his eyes squeezed shut. "Hey," Clara said softly. Her voice wasn't high-pitched or patronizing. It was calm, grounded. "That looks like a really big feeling for such a little guy." Mateo's eyes flew open. He hiccuped, surprised that someone was down on the floor with him. Lorenzo stiffened. "Miss, get up. We don't need." Clara held up a hand, silencing the Dawn of New York without even looking at him. "Just a second." She looked back at Mateo. "I bet you're tired. And I bet all these people staring makes you feel like a bug in a jar, right?" Mateo sniffled, wiping his nose on his sleeve. He nodded slowly. "I hate it too," Clara whispered like it was a secret. "Sometimes I want to scream and throw my tray on the floor." Mateo's eyes went wide. "You do?" "Oh yeah, especially when my feet hurt. But I can't. So you know what I do instead?" Clara reached into her apron pocket, not for a weapon, which made the bodyguard relax slightly, but for a couple of colorful bendy straws she kept for the kids, sodas. She quickly twisted the pink and blue straws together. Her fingers moved deftly, a skill learned from entertaining her younger brothers before they were taken into foster care. In 10 seconds she had fashioned a crude plastic flower. "I make something ugly into something pretty," she said, handing it to him. "For you." Mateo took the straw flower. He stopped crying, his breathing hitched, then calmed. He looked at the flower, then at Clara. For the first time in months, the frantic terror in his eyes vanished. "Thank you," Mateo whispered. Clara smiled, a genuine, warm smile that seemed to light up her tired face. "You're welcome, handsome. Now, do you think you can eat a strawberry if I cut it into a heart shape?" "Okay," Mateo said. Clara stood up, smoothing her apron. She placed the bowl of strawberries on the table. Only then did she turn to look at Lorenzo Valenti. The entire restaurant was watching. Lorenzo was staring at her as if she had just performed a magic trick. He was used to women looking at him with lust or fear. Clara looked at him with exhaustion and maybe a little bit of judgment. "He's not being bad, sir," Clara said, her voice firm but respectful. "He's just overwhelmed. The lights are bright, the noise is loud, and—" She glanced at Vanessa, who was scrolling on her phone. "He feels alone." Vanessa scoffed. "Excuse me? I am right here." Clara ignored her. She looked Lorenzo in the eye. "He just needs a mom, or at least someone who remembers what it's like to be small." Lorenzo felt a punch in his gut. He just needs a mom. It was the one thing Lorenzo, with all his millions and his power, could not buy. "What is your name?" Lorenzo asked. His voice was different now. The roughness was gone, replaced by an intense curiosity. "Clara," she said. "Clara Mitchell." "Well, Clara Mitchell," Lorenzo said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a black card made of titanium. He didn't hand it to her. He placed it on the table. "Add a $5,000 tip to the bill for the strawberries." The room gasped. Clara looked at the card, then at the money. Her heart hammered against her ribs. $5,000 would pay off her semester. It would save her. But her pride was a tricky thing. "The strawberries were on the house, sir," she said softly. "I didn't do it for the tip. I did it because he was crying." She turned and walked back to the kitchen, leaving the Dawn of New York staring at her back, completely stunned. "Lorenzo!" Vanessa snapped, reaching for her wine. "She was incredibly rude. You should have her fired." Lorenzo turned his cold gaze to Vanessa. "Get out." Vanessa froze. "What?" "Get out of my sight," Lorenzo said calmly. "Mateo and I are going to finish our dinner, alone." As Vanessa stormed out in a huff, Lorenzo looked at his son, who was quietly eating a strawberry heart and playing with the plastic flower. Lorenzo pulled out his phone and texted his consigliere, Marcus. "Find out everything about the waitress at the Gilded Lily. Clara Mitchell. I want her file on my desk by morning." The next morning, Clara's life began to unravel. She woke up in her tiny, drafty apartment in Queens. The radiator was clanking, and there was a final notice from the electric company slipped under her door. "Great," she muttered, rubbing her face. "Just great." She made instant coffee and sat on her futon, opening her laptop to check her bank account. $7.40. Rent was due in 3 days. The shift at the restaurant last night had been good, but she hadn't taken the $5,000. She couldn't. Taking money from a man like Lorenzo Valenti felt like signing a contract with the devil in blood. Her phone rang. It was the nursing school registrar. "Miss Mitchell," the voice said dryly, "we haven't received your tuition payment for the upcoming semester. If we don't have the funds by Friday, we'll have to drop you from the program." "I know," Clara stammered, gripping the phone. "I'm working on it. Please, I just need a few more days." "Friday, Miss Mitchell, noon." The line went dead. Clara put her head in her hands. She was going to lose everything. Being a nurse was her dream. It was the only way she could prove to herself that she could save people, unlike how she failed to save her parents from their own bad choices. A heavy knock on her door made her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her neighborhood wasn't exactly the kind where friends dropped by. She walked to the door, looking through the peephole. She gasped and stumbled back. Standing in her hallway wasn't her landlord. It was the massive bodyguard from the restaurant Rocco. And standing next to him, looking wildly out of place in the peeling hallway of the Queen's tenement, was Marcus, Lorenzo Valenti's right-hand man. "Miss Mitchell?" Marcus called out. "We know you're in there. We just want to talk." Clara's heart raced. Had she offended the Don by refusing the tip? Was this a hit? She grabbed a baseball bat she kept by the door and opened it just a crack, leaving the chain on. "What do you want?" she demanded. Marcus smiled politely. He was older, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Clara's entire building. "Mr. Valenti would like to make you a job offer." "I already have a job," Clara said, "with all due respect." Marcus said, glancing at the eviction notice peeking out of her mail pile on the floor. "Mr. Valenti can offer you something significantly better. He needs a nanny." Clara laughed, a dry, nervous sound. "A nanny? I'm a waitress and a nursing student. I'm not a nanny." "We saw you with Matteo last night," Marcus said, his voice dropping lower. "Since his mother passed, no one has been able to calm him down. Not the best psychologists in the city, not the expensive au pairs from Europe, just you." Clara softened. She remembered the little boy's sad eyes. "Mr. Valenti is prepared to pay off your nursing school tuition in full," Marcus continued, watching her reaction closely. "Plus a salary of $10,000 a month, plus room and board at the estate." Clara dropped the baseball bat. It clattered loudly on the floor. "What?" "Full tuition, $10,000 a month." "Live-in," Marcus repeated. "All you have to do is look after Matteo, be the maternal influence he is lacking." It was too good to be true. It had to be a trap. But what choice did she have? The electricity was about to be cut. School was about to kick her out. "I need to meet him first," Clara said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "In a public place." Marcus chuckled. "Miss Mitchell, you will meet him at his home. If we wanted to hurt you, we wouldn't be knocking." 2 hours later, Clara was sitting in the back of a blacked-out Cadillac Escalade, watching the city skyline fade into the lush greenery of upstate New York. The Valenti estate wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. High stone walls, iron gates, and armed guards patrolling the perimeter with German shepherds. The car pulled up to a massive Mediterranean-style mansion. It was beautiful, but cold. It felt like a museum, not a home. Clara was escorted into a library that smelled of old paper and cigars. Lorenzo was standing by the window, looking out at the gardens. He turned when she entered. In the daylight, he was even more intimidating. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tattoos on his forearms that hinted at a violent past. "You came," Lorenzo said. "Your offer was aggressive," Clara replied, clutching her purse. "I don't like to waste time. Do you want the job?" "I have conditions," Clara blurted out. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. People didn't give him conditions. "Go on." "I finished my nursing degree. I attend classes 3 days a week. And I don't get involved in whatever it is you do." She waved her hand vaguely at him. I'm there for Matteo. Not for you. Not for your business. Lorenzo stepped closer. The scent of sandalwood and danger wafted off him. He looked down at her, studying her defiance. He liked it. Most people groveled. Clara stood her ground. Agreed, Lorenzo said. But I have rules, too. You live here. You don't bring guests. You don't talk to the press. And you never, ever take Matteo off the property without my direct permission. My enemies are real, Clara, and they will use him to get to me. I understand, Clara said. Good. Matteo is in the playroom. He's been asking for the straw lady all morning. Clara nodded and turned to leave. Clara, Lorenzo called out. She stopped. Why didn't you take the money last night? Clara looked back over her shoulder. Because kindness shouldn't have a price tag, Mr. Valenti, even in your world. Lorenzo watched her walk away, a strange tightness in his chest. He turned back to the window. Marcus, he said to the empty room. Marcus stepped out of the shadows. Boss? Run a deeper background check. She's too clean. Nobody in this city is that innocent. I already did, boss, Marcus said, looking uneasy. There's a gap in her records, from when she was 6 to 10 years old. Her name was changed. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. Changed from what? We don't know yet. The files are sealed by the Witness Protection Program. Lorenzo's hands clenched into fists. Witness protection. That meant her family had testified against someone, maybe even against his family. Keep her close, Lorenzo whispered, his voice turning into ice. Let her bond with the boy, but watch her every move. If she's a spy, I'll kill her myself. The Valenti estate was less of a home and more of a mausoleum built for the living. The hallways were lined with marble busts of Roman emperors and oil paintings of men who looked just like Lorenzo, severe, dark-eyed, and dangerous. For the first week, Clara felt like an intruder. She moved through the house like a ghost, terrified of knocking over a vase that cost more than her entire life's earnings. The staff, a small army of maids and cooks, treated her with a strange mix of pity and suspicion. They knew she was the nanny, but they also knew she had been brought in by Marcus and Rocco, which meant she was business. And in the Valenti household, business usually ended in blood. But Matteo was the light in the darkness. Miss Clara, look! Matteo was currently covered in blue finger paint. They were in the sunroom, a space that had previously been pristine white, but was now littered with construction paper and dried macaroni art. That is a masterpiece, Matteo, Clara said, wiping a smudge of blue off his nose. Is it a dinosaur? It's Papa. Matteo beamed, pointing to a blue blob with angry black eyebrows. Clara choked back a laugh. It looks just like him. Suddenly, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Clara didn't need to turn around to know who was standing in the doorway. The scent of expensive cologne and cigar smoke announced him before he even spoke. Is there a reason my son is covered in filth? Lorenzo's voice was low, cutting through the laughter like a serrated knife. Clara stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. She turned to face him. Lorenzo was wearing a 3-piece charcoal suit, looking every inch the Mafia Don. He was staring at the blue blob on the paper with an unreadable expression. It's not filth, Mr. Valenti. It's creative expression, Clara said, her heart hammering. She was still terrified of him, but she refused to show it in front of the boy. Matteo was learning fine motor skills. Lorenzo looked from the painting to Clara. He had been watching them on the security feed from his office for the last hour. He should have been reviewing the shipping manifests from the Jersey docks, or planning the retaliation against the Russian syndicate that had encroached on his territory. Instead, he was watching a woman with messy hair teach his son how to paint. It annoyed him. It annoyed him that she made Matteo smile in a way he never could. It annoyed him that every time he looked at her, he forgot, for a split second, that she might be a federal informant sent to destroy him. Clean him up, Lorenzo ordered. Dinner is in an hour. We have guests. And dress him in a suit. No, He gestured vaguely at Matteo's stained t-shirt. No rags. "Guests?" Clara asked. "Does that mean Matteo is eating with you?" Usually, Matteo ate in the kitchen with Clara. Lorenzo ate alone in the dining room, sitting at the head of a table long enough to land a plane on. "Yes, Vanessa is coming over. And her father, Senator Sterling." Clara stiffened. Vanessa, the woman from the restaurant who had called a grieving 4-year-old a brat. "With all due respect, sir," Clara said, stepping between Lorenzo and Matteo slightly, a protective instinct taking over. Matteo gets anxious around strangers, especially ones who aren't kind. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. He took a step closer to her, invading her personal space. He towered over her, radiating power. "Are you telling me how to raise my son, Miss Mitchell?" "I'm telling you what your son needs, Mr. Valenti. That's what you pay me for." They stared at each other. The air crackled with tension. It wasn't just anger. It was something else. A magnetic pull that Lorenzo resented and Clara didn't understand. He looked at her defiance and saw a fire that matched his own. "Have him ready at 7, Lorenzo said, breaking the gaze. "And you will join us." "Me?" Clara blinked. "To manage him," Lorenzo said coldly. "If he cries, you handle it. If he embarrasses me in front of the senator, you're fired." He turned on his heel and walked away. Dinner was a disaster waiting to happen. The dining room was dimly lit by a massive crystal chandelier. Senator Sterling, a bloated man with a red face, sat on Lorenzo's right. Vanessa sat on his left, looking predatory in a red silk dress. Lorenzo sat at the head, looking like a king on his throne. Clara sat at the far end, next to Matteo, who was strapped into a high chair, wearing a miniature tuxedo that made him look adorable but uncomfortable. Clara had changed into her only nice dress, a simple black sheath she used for church and funerals. "So, Lorenzo," the senator boomed, cutting into his steak. "The Port Authority contract. I assume your associates have smoothed over the union issues?" "The union is happy, Senator," Lorenzo said smoothly, taking a sip of wine. "Labor disputes are messy, but I find that everyone is reasonable when the price is right." "Or when the alternative is a broken leg," Vanessa giggled, touching Lorenzo's arm. Lorenzo didn't smile. He gently removed her hand from his arm. "And who is this?" Vanessa asked, her eyes flicking to Clara like she was a bug on the salad. "Oh, the waitress. I see you took my advice and hired help, though I expected someone more professional." "Clara is highly qualified," Lorenzo said, surprising everyone, including himself. "She is a nursing student." "A nurse?" Vanessa sneered. "How quaint." "I suppose that's useful, if Matteo chokes on his food again." Matteo shrank in his chair. He could feel the hostility coming off Vanessa like heat from an oven. He reached for his juice cup, his hand trembling. Smash! The cup tipped over. Orange juice flooded the white tablecloth and dripped onto the floor. "Oh, for God's sake!" Vanessa shrieked, jumping up. "My shoes! Those are Louboutins!" The senator looked annoyed. "Lorenzo, can't you keep the boy under control?" Lorenzo's hand clenched around his steak knife. His knuckles turned white. He looked at Matteo, who was about to burst into tears. He saw the terror in his son's eyes. Terror of him, of the shouting, of the anger. Before Lorenzo could speak, Clara was moving. She didn't apologize. She didn't scramble for napkins. She stood up calmly, picked up Matteo, and held him close to her chest. "It was an accident," Clara said, her voice ringing clear through the room. She looked directly at Vanessa. "Shoes can be replaced, Miss Sterling. A child's confidence is a little harder to fix." The room went silent. The senator's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Vanessa's mouth dropped open. No one spoke to the Sterlings that way. Clara turned to Lorenzo. She expected him to fire her. She expected him to yell. "I'm taking him upstairs," Clara said. "He's done with dinner, and frankly so am I." She walked out. Lorenzo watched her go. He watched the way she held his son, shielding him from the toxicity in the room. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. Pride. "Insolent little girl," the senator huffed. "You need to teach her a lesson, Lorenzo." Lorenzo looked at the senator. His eyes were dead cold. "She's right," Lorenzo said softly. "They are just shoes, Frank. Sit down and eat your steak before I lose my appetite. You don't want to see me when I lose my appetite." The senator sat down. He didn't say another word for the rest of the meal. That night, Lorenzo went to the nursery. He expected to find Matteo asleep. Instead, he found Clara sitting in the rocking chair, reading a book by the light of a small lamp. Matteo was asleep in her arms, clutching the plastic straw flower from the restaurant. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, watching. "You defended him," Lorenzo said. Clara looked up, startled. "Someone had to. That woman is a viper." "That woman is the key to my political protection," Lorenzo said, stepping into the room. "Insulting her is dangerous." "I don't care about your politics," Clara whispered furiously. "I care about Matteo. He thinks you hate him." Lorenzo froze. "What?" "He thinks he's a disappointment to you because he's not tough. Because he cries." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "He's 4, Lorenzo. He lost his mom. He doesn't need to be a soldier. He needs his dad to hug him." Lorenzo looked at his sleeping son. The pain of losing Elena washed over him, the guilt that he hadn't been driving the car, that he had survived while she died. He had pulled away from Matteo because looking at the boy was like looking at a ghost. "I don't know how," Lorenzo admitted, his voice cracking. The mask of the Don slipped, revealing the broken man beneath. "I don't know how to be what he needs. My father, he didn't hug, he hit." Clara softened. She saw the cycle of trauma standing right in front of her. "Break the cycle," she said softly. Lorenzo walked over. He reached out, hesitating, then rested his large hand on Matteo's head. He brushed the hair back from the boy's forehead. Matteo sighed in his sleep, leaning into his father's touch. Lorenzo looked at Clara. They were inches apart. He could smell her shampoo, vanilla and honey. He looked at her lips, then up to her eyes. For a moment, the air was charged with electricity. He wanted to lean in. He wanted to forget the senator, the business, the threats. Then, his earpiece buzzed. "Boss!" Marcus's voice crackled. "We have a problem." The background check on Clara came back with a flag. The FBI file it just got decrypted. Lorenzo pulled back as if he had been burned. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by the icy wall of the Godfather. "Good night, Miss Mitchell," he said abruptly. He turned and walked out, leaving Clara confused and shivering in the warm room. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house had shifted from cold to hostile. Clara felt it the moment she walked into the kitchen. The staff wouldn't look her in the eye. When she tried to take Matteo to the garden, 2 guards blocked her path. "Mr. Valenti's orders," Rocco grunted, not meeting her gaze. "The boy stays inside, and so do you." "Am I a prisoner?" Clara asked, her stomach twisting. "We follow orders, miss." Clara took Matteo back to the playroom, trying to keep a brave face. Something was wrong. Had she pushed Lorenzo too far last night? Or was it something else? Lorenzo was in his study, staring at a file on his mahogany desk. Marcus stood opposite him. "Are you sure?" Lorenzo asked, his voice deadly quiet. "It's confirmed," Marcus said. "Clara Mitchell's real name is Clara Russo. She's the daughter of Carlo Russo." Lorenzo closed his eyes. Carlo Russo. The accountant for the Moretti family, the Valenti's sworn enemies. 10 years ago, Carlo turned state's witness. He gave the feds the evidence to put half of New York's mobsters in prison. Lorenzo's own uncle had died in jail because of Carlo Russo's testimony. The Russos went into witness protection. But Carlo couldn't stop gambling. He racked up debts, got exposed, and was killed in a robbery 2 years ago. "She's a Russo," Lorenzo hissed, "the daughter of a rat." "It explains why her file was sealed," Marcus said. "It doesn't prove she's working against us, boss. She might just be hiding. Or she's here for revenge." Lorenzo slammed his fist on the desk. "She infiltrated my home. She got close to my son. She manipulated me." He thought about the moment in the nursery, how close he had come to kissing her. It made him sick. He felt played. "Bring her here," Lorenzo ordered. Clara was escorting Matteo to his nap when Rocco grabbed her arm. "The boss wants you. Now!" "Rocco, you're hurting me," Clara cried out. "Move!" He dragged her down the hall, shoving her into Lorenzo's study. The heavy doors slammed shut behind her. Clara stumbled, catching herself on a chair. Lorenzo was standing by the fireplace, his back to her. "Lorenzo, what is going on?" she asked, rubbing her arm. "Your goons are treating me like a criminal." Lorenzo turned around. He held up a piece of paper. "Hello, Clara Russo." Clara's blood ran cold. The room spun. She hadn't heard that name in 15 years. Not since the marshals took her and her parents away in the middle of the night. Her voice failed her. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Lorenzo walked toward her, slow and predatory. "Did you think you could walk into my house, charm my son, and I wouldn't know you were the daughter of the man who betrayed my family?" "It's not what you think," Clara pleaded, backing up until she hit the desk. "I didn't know who you were. I mean, I knew you were a Valenti, but I didn't know about the history. I was 6 years old when my dad testified." "Liar!" Lorenzo roared. "You're here for the Morettis, aren't you? Or maybe the feds sent you to finish what your father started." "No, I'm just a nurse. I'm just trying to survive." Clara was crying now, tears of frustration and fear. "My father was a bad man, Lorenzo. He destroyed my life, too. I've been running from his shadow since I was a little girl. I took this job because I was broke, not because I'm a spy." Lorenzo grabbed her shoulders, pinning her against the desk. His face was inches from hers. He was searching her eyes for the lie, for the deception, but all he saw was terror and a raw, honest pain that mirrored his own. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't put a bullet in you right now," Lorenzo whispered. "Because I love him," Clara choked out. "Matteo, I love him. And if you kill me, who is going to make him straw flowers? You?" Lorenzo stared at her. His grip on her shoulders loosened slightly. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the house. The windows of the study shattered inward, spraying glass everywhere. Lorenzo threw himself over Clara, shielding her body with his own as the shockwave hit them. Alarms started blaring. Gunfire erupted in the hallway. "What is that?" Clara screamed, her ears ringing. Lorenzo rolled off her, pulling a sleek black handgun from a holster at the small of his back. His face had shifted from angry lover to cold-blooded killer in a split second. "We're under attack," Lorenzo said. "Stay here." "Matteo!" Clara screamed, scrambling up. "He's in his room." "I'll get him!" "No!" Clara pushed past him, ignoring the glass cutting her feet. "I'm going!" Lorenzo didn't argue. He grabbed her arm and they ran into the hallway. It was chaos. Smoke filled the air. 2 of Lorenzo's guards were down. Men in black tactical gear and ski masks were moving up the stairs. "Morettis," Lorenzo growled. He raised his gun and fired 2 shots. 2 men dropped. "Get to the nursery! Go!" Clara sprinted through the smoke. She didn't think. She just reacted. She reached the nursery door just as a man in a mask kicked it open. Matteo was screaming inside. The intruder grabbed Matteo by the arm, dragging him out from under the bed. "No!" Clara screamed. She didn't have a weapon. She had a lamp. She grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the hallway table and charged. The intruder turned, raising his gun, but he was too slow. Clara swung the lamp with all the strength of a desperate mother figure. It connected with the side of his head with a sickening crunch. The man crumbled. Matteo was sobbing, curled into a ball. Clara scooped him up, shielding his face into her neck. "It's okay, baby. I've got you. I've got you," she whispered, though she was shaking violently. She turned to run, but another man appeared in the doorway, blocking her exit. He raised an assault rifle, aiming it right at her chest. "Hand over the boy, Russo," the man said. His voice was muffled by the mask. Clara froze. He knew her name. "Over my dead body," she spat. "That can be arranged." The man's finger tightened on the trigger. Clara squeezed her eyes shut, turning her back to him to shield Matteo with her own body. She waited for the bullet. Bang! The shot was deafening. But Clara didn't feel pain. She heard a thud. She turned around. The gunman was on the floor, a hole in the center of his forehead. Standing at the end of the hall, smoke swirling around him like a demon, was Lorenzo. His gun was smoking. His eyes were wild. He walked over to them, stepping over the bodies. He looked at Clara, who was covered in dust, blood, and glass, holding his son like her life depended on it. He looked at the man she had taken down with a lamp. "You're not a spy," Lorenzo said, his voice hoarse. "I told you," Clara whispered, her adrenaline fading, her knees giving out. Lorenzo caught her before she hit the floor. He wrapped one arm around her and the other around Matteo, pulling them both into his chest. For the first time in years, the Don of New York felt fear, not for himself, but for the two people in his arms. "We have to go," Lorenzo said. "The house is compromised." "We're leaving." "Where?" Clara asked. "To the safe house," Lorenzo said darkly. "And then, I'm going to burn the Moretti family to the ground." The safe house was a cabin nestled deep in the Catskill Mountains, miles away from the nearest paved road. It was a structure of timber and stone, surrounded by dense pine forests that whispered in the wind. To the average hiker, it looked like a hunter's lodge. To Lorenzo Valenti, it was a fortress. It had bulletproof glass, a generator in the basement, and enough weapons to start a small revolution. The drive had been silent and terrifying. Lorenzo had driven like a madman, constantly checking the mirrors, while Clara huddled in the back seat, keeping Matteo's head down. When they finally pulled into the garage and the heavy steel door rolled shut behind them, the adrenaline finally crashed. Clara stepped out of the car and her legs gave way. "Clara!" Lorenzo was there instantly, catching her. "I'm fine," she gasped, though her face was pale. "Just my feet." She looked down. She had run through the shattered glass of the study barefoot. Her feet were shredded, the blood soaking into the floor mats of the car. "Take Matteo inside," Lorenzo ordered, scooping Clara up into his arms bridal style. "Upstairs, master bedroom, don't argue." Clara didn't argue. She held onto his neck, feeling the hard muscles of his shoulders. For a man who had just shot 3 people, he held her with surprising gentleness. Inside, the cabin was freezing. Lorenzo set Clara on the edge of the massive bed and quickly started a fire in the stone hearth. He then brought Matteo, who was silent and wide-eyed, to the bed. "Matteo," Lorenzo said, crouching down, "are you hurt?" Matteo shook his head. He crawled over to Clara and buried his face in her side. "He's in shock," Clara whispered, stroking the boy's hair. "He needs warm milk and sleep." "I'll get the milk, and the first aid kit." 20 minutes later, the room was warm. Matteo had drunk his milk and passed out from exhaustion, tucked under a heavy down quilt in the center of the bed. Lorenzo sat on the floor at Clara's feet. He had a basin of warm water, antiseptic, and tweezers. "This is going to sting," he said, looking up at her. His eyes were dark pools of regret. "I'm a nurse, remember?" Clara gave a weak smile. "I know how it works." Lorenzo gently took her foot in his hand. He began to clean the wounds, carefully picking out shards of glass. His touch was clinical but tender. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with unspoken words. "You knew my name," Clara said softly, breaking the silence. "Back at the house. You knew I was a Russo." Lorenzo paused, his hand tightening slightly on her ankle. "Yes, Marcus found the file, and you thought I was a traitor." "You are the daughter of the man who put my uncle in the ground," Lorenzo said, his voice low. "In my world, sins of the father are passed to the child." "I hated him too, you know," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Carlo Russo didn't just betray the Valentis. He betrayed us. He gambled away our house. He hit my mother when she tried to hide money for groceries. When he testified, he didn't do it for justice. He did it to save his own skin." Lorenzo looked up, meeting her gaze. He saw the truth in her eyes, the years of shame, the poverty, the struggle to be different. "I changed my name to Mitchell because I wanted to be free of him," Clara continued, tears spilling over. "I wanted to be Clara the nurse, not Clara the rat's daughter. And when I saw Matteo, I didn't see a Valenti. I just saw a little boy who was scared and alone, like I used to be." Lorenzo dropped the tweezers into the basin. He reached up and cupped her face with his hand. His thumb brushed away a tear. "I almost killed you," Lorenzo whispered, the horror of it evident in his voice. "If the Morettis hadn't attacked, I might have pulled that trigger. I would have killed the only person who has ever made my son smile." "But you didn't," Clara whispered. "You saved us." "You saved him first." Lorenzo leaned in closer, his forehead resting against hers. "You fought a hitman with a lamp, Clara. You are magnificent." The air between them shifted. The danger of the night faded, replaced by a magnetic pull that had been building for weeks. Lorenzo looked at her lips. He saw the pulse fluttering in her neck. "Lorenzo." She breathed. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, fueled by adrenaline and near-death terror. It tasted of smoke and whiskey. Clara's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. For a moment, they weren't a Don and a nanny. They were just two survivors clinging to each other in the dark. Lorenzo pulled back, breathing hard. He looked at her as if she was the most precious thing in the world. "I promise you," he vowed, his voice a low growl, "I will fix this. I will end the Morettis. And then we figure this out. You and me." Clara nodded, breathless. "Okay." "Sleep," he commanded gently. "I'll take the first watch." Lorenzo moved to the armchair by the window, his gun resting on his knee, watching the snow start to fall outside. He watched over Clara and Matteo like a guardian wolf. But his mind was racing. The hitman had known Clara's name. Hand over the boy, Russo. Only 3 people knew that name: Lorenzo, Marcus, and the feds. The feds wouldn't send a hit squad to kill a child. That left the Valentis. Someone inside his inner circle had sold her out. Someone had unlocked the file, given it to Lorenzo to distract him, and then gave the Morettis the green light to attack while Lorenzo was busy interrogating her. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed in the darkness. He knew who had given him the file. Marcus. Morning brought a blinding white light as the sun reflected off the fresh snow surrounding the cabin. Inside, however, the atmosphere was preparing for war. Clara woke alone. She limped downstairs to find Lorenzo checking a duffel bag of ammunition. He looked up, his face grim. "I have to go," Lorenzo said, handing her a mug of coffee. "I set a trap. I told Marcus I'm at the secondary safe house in Jersey. If the Morettis show up there, I know Marcus is the traitor. I need to be there to spring the ambush." "You're leaving us here?" Clara asked, panic rising in her chest. "You are safer here. No one knows about this cabin except me. Not even Marcus." Lorenzo led her to the basement door. "There is a panic room behind the wine rack. If you hear anything at all, you take Matteo and lock yourself in. Do not come out until I come back." He handed her a small, cold pistol. "Do you know how to use this?" "I grew up in a mob house," Clara said, gripping the gun. "I know how to take the safety off." "Good." He kissed her hard, a goodbye that felt like a promise. Keep him safe. Clara watched his car disappear down the snowy track. Silence swallowed the cabin. 3 hours passed. Clara paced the living room while Matteo played quietly with wooden blocks. The isolation was suffocating. Suddenly, the landline in the kitchen rang. Clara froze. Lorenzo had said no one knew about this place. If the phone was ringing, she picked it up slowly. "Hello?" "Hello, Clara," a voice purred. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was smooth, cultured, and terrifying. It was Marcus. Clara gripped the counter, her knuckles white. "Marcus? Lorenzo is waiting for you in Jersey." "Oh, Clara, did Lorenzo really think he could trick me?" Marcus chuckled darkly. "I've been tracking his car's GPS for years. I know he's in Jersey. And I know my men are currently ambushing him. He's likely dead by now." "No," Clara whispered. "But I didn't go to Jersey," Marcus continued pleasantly. "I'm nearby, about 5 minutes away, actually. I'm coming for the boy." "Why?" Clara screamed. "He's a child. He's $50 million from the Moretti family. It's nothing personal, my dear. It's just retirement planning." The line went dead. Clara dropped the phone. 5 minutes. "Mateo!" she yelled. "Shoes! Now!" She grabbed the terrified boy and dragged him down to the freezing basement. She shoved the heavy wine rack aside, revealing the steel door of the vault. "Listen to me," Clara said, kneeling to look him in the eye. "We are playing the hiding game. You go in there, you lock the door, and you do not open it for anyone except Papa. Not even for me. Do you understand?" "I'm scared," Mateo cried. "I know, but you are a Valenti. You are brave." She kissed his forehead one last time. "I love you. Now go." She pushed him in and swung the shelf back into place, just as she heard tires crunching on the gravel outside. Clara ran back upstairs. She couldn't hide in the basement with him. If they found the panic room, they would drill it open. She had to be the decoy. The front door burst open. Marcus walked in, flanked by 2 armed guards. He looked like a grandfather coming for a visit, except for the cruelty in his eyes. "Clara," he smiled, "where is the little prince?" Clara raised the gun and fired. The bullet shattered a vase near Marcus's head. Before she could fire again, a guard tackled her. The gun skittered across the floor. "Feisty," Marcus noted, wiping dust from his coat. He walked over and slapped her hard. Clara tasted blood. "Where's the boy?" Lorenzo took him. Clara spat. "Liar!" Marcus looked at the wooden blocks still scattered on the rug. "He's here." He signaled the guards. "Tear the place apart. If you don't find him in 5 minutes, burn the house down. Smoke usually flushes out the rats." Clara's heart stopped. If they torched the cabin, Mateo would suffocate in the vault. She couldn't give him up, but she couldn't let him die. She had to get them away from the house. "No!" Clara screamed, struggling against the guard's grip. "Don't burn it!" Marcus pulled out a gold lighter and flicked the flame. "Then tell me where he is." Clara made a split-second decision. She would trade her life for Mateo's. "He's in the woods," she lied, sobbing dramatically. "I told him to run to the old mill by the creek." Marcus studied her face, looking for the lie. He saw only desperation. He snapped the lighter shut. "Check the woods," Marcus ordered, "and bring her with us. If she's lying, I'll kill her slowly." As they dragged Clara out into the snow, she looked back at the silent cabin one last time. "Stay quiet, Mateo," she prayed. "Please, Papa is coming." She was shoved into the back of Marcus's SUV. As they drove away, Clara realized with a sinking heart that she was now the only thing standing between Mateo and death, and she had no idea if Lorenzo was even alive to save them. The old mill was a desolate ruin against the gray winter sky. Marcus shoved Clara into the snow, his face twisted in a mask of pure hatred. "You lied to me." Marcus spat, aiming his gun at her knee. "I'll burn the cabin later, but first, I'm going to enjoy this. Goodbye, Miss Russo." Clara squeezed her eyes shut, praying for Mateo. She heard the trigger click. But there was no pain. "Drop it, Marcus." The voice rolled through the trees like thunder. Marcus spun around, panic flaring. Emerging from the tree line, covered in snow and looking like the Grim Reaper, was Lorenzo. "Impossible," Marcus stammered, backing away. "You went to Jersey. The car exploded." "I sent the car with a remote driver," Lorenzo said, his voice deadly calm as he stepped closer. "I knew you were the snake, Marcus. I just needed you to show your fangs." Lorenzo looked at Clara, at her bruised cheek and bound hands. The calm vanished, replaced by a darkness more terrifying than any weapon. "You touched her!" "She's a Russo!" Marcus yelled, raising his gun. "She's the enemy! I did this for the family." "She is my family," Lorenzo roared. He didn't bother with his rifle. He closed the distance in a blur of motion. Before Marcus could fire, Lorenzo snapped his wrist with a sickening crunch. What followed wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Lorenzo unleashed years of repressed rage, until the traitor lay motionless in the snow. He rushed to Clara, cutting her ropes and pulling her into his arms. "I thought you were dead," she sobbed. "I will never leave you," he whispered fiercely. "Now, let's get our son." They raced back to the cabin. Clara tore open the hidden wine rack in the basement, her heart pounding. "Mateo?" The panic room door creaked open. Matteo sat in the corner, clutching his flashlight, tear-streaked but unharmed. "Papa!" Lorenzo fell to his knees, crushing the boy into his chest. "I've got you, son." Matteo looked at Clara. "I was brave, Miss Clara. I didn't open the door." Lorenzo looked at Clara over his son's head. His eyes burned with devotion. "Let's go home." 6 months later, the scent of lemons and sea salt filled the air. The Villa Valenti, perched high above the Italian Amalfi coast, was a world away from the blood and snow of New York. Lorenzo had ruthlessly dismantled the Moretti family before handing over power and moving his family to safety. Clara sat on the terrace, studying for her final nursing exam. Lorenzo approached, holding a velvet box. "Miss Russo?" he teased. "It's Miss Mitchell on the paperwork," she smiled. "I prefer Clara," Lorenzo said, kneeling beside her. "You haven't been, just the nanny, since the moment we met. You saved my son. You saved my soul." He opened the box. Inside was a massive yellow diamond, cut to resemble a sunflower. "It's not made of straws," Lorenzo smirked. "But it lasts longer. Marry me, Clara. Be the mother he needs. Be the wife I need." Clara looked at the ring, then at the man who had walked through fire for her. She thought of the little boy sleeping upstairs who now laughed every day. "Yes," Clara whispered. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the sun set over the ocean. The Don and the nanny were no more. They were finally just a family. And that is how a brave waitress tamed the most dangerous man in New York, proving that sometimes the strongest power isn't fear, it's love. What did you think of the ending? Do you think Marcus got what he deserved? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new dramatic story. Thanks for watching.